What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Malari. So last night, the New York Giants got a huge win on Thursday Night Football, beating the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Surprise win, especially considering the tough loss the Giants had last week against New Orleans in New Orleans. Big-time win, though, for the Giants last night, beating the Eagles 34-17, an unlikely win. I don't think anybody gave the Giants a chance in this game, considering how poorly they played last week, how the Eagles seem to always beat the Giants, just like Dallas seems to always beat the Giants. I don't think anybody gave the Giants really a chance in this game. And to be honest, I didn't give them much of a chance just because of how poorly they played last week. And then you add in the Eagles have a good pass rush, even with Jalen Carter being out. They seem to always get home against the Giants. And the Giants also struggle against the run. They've been very poor against run heavy offenses this year, and that's why I thought it would be tough for the Giants to try to stop Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. Little did I know the Giants defense would come out ready to play last night, and if you look at that team overall last night, you saw a great pass rush. Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence doing their job. You saw the secondary showing up in some big moments. The Giants were up 10 points late in the game, which this was probably the turning point in the game. I think this play itself won the Giants the game. The Giants were up by 10 on their own 15-yard line. Philadelphia had the ball. Philly was going in to either make it a 3-point game or a 7-point game. They were moving the ball pretty easily on this drive, going 4 plays, 26 yards in a minute and 26 seconds. They were on the Giants' 15-yard line, 11:30 to go. The Giants were up 27-17 at this point. And Jalen Hurts threw a ball across the side of the left side of the field that was picked off by Cor'Dale Flott. And Flott's a guy I've mentioned here on the podcast many of times. Flott's a player I'm very high on. I think he should have a bigger role in the defense. He was a young player and the Giants drafted him in the third round out of LSU a few years ago. Played a good role when the Giants made the playoffs back in 2022. He was a good contributor on the defense, and then there was an expectation he would have a bigger role over time. That never ended up happening. The Giants signed some other cornerbacks, especially this offseason, getting Paulson Adebo, and then drafting Tyler Nubin last year as a safety, also getting a safety in Javon Holland this year in free agency. Over the last few years, the Giants have continued to add to their secondary, and at the same time, while they're doing that, they're limiting the role that Cor'Dale Flott could have. And my friend Dylan and Dylan's been on the podcast many of times when I was a student at BC. Dylan and I are huge fans of Cor'Dale Flott, and we've said for years he should have a bigger role in the defense and that they should trust him more. Because it seems like over the last 6 games this year, and then even dating back to last season, Cor'Dale Flott was getting some limited snaps. The Giants were giving Deonte Banks more snaps in some certain situations over Flott, and I don't think that was ever warranted. And Banks was a top pick. He was a first-round pick, if I remember correctly, 25th overall to the Giants back in 2023. And since he was drafted high, the Giants have continued to give him more chances than they probably have should, and that's led to Cor'Dale Flott getting some limited snaps. But last night, there was a report going into that game that the Giants would stop letting Flott play more in situations where they would have Banks in some certain situations, third down, short yardage, whatever it may be. They're going to have Flott play in more of those situations. Last night, big-time moment. Giants were up by 10, 11:37 to go. And Flott had a big-time interception. It was a throw from Jalen Hurts to the left side of the field, intended for Saquon Barkley. And not only did Flott read the route perfectly like a book, he also knew the pass was coming, got his hands out there, made a really good catch, and then returned it about 80 yards. And that was the turning point in that game. That throw was at about the New York Giants' 9-yard line, and Flott returned that to the Philadelphia Eagles' 23-yard line. That's a 10-point game. Philadelphia's going to make it a one-possession game with about 11 minutes to go, 10 minutes to go, and that's when the Giants would start to worry. But in that moment, Flott read the route like a book, like I said, returned it, and I think that was the moment that I knew, okay, the Giants are going to win this ball game. And Philadelphia just did not look fully all locked in and on the same page last night. There were some miscues with their offensive line. There were some issues with their secondary. Some Giants receivers getting open. Wan'Dale Robinson seemed to get open every time the Giants needed a first down catch or some short yardage moment where they needed to get 3 or 4 yards. It seemed like Wan'Dale was getting open. Same thing with Skattebo. Skattebo seemed to always get those short yardage gains that the Giants needed to keep the drives rolling. And that was the issue with Philadelphia last night. That's something that the Giants usually struggle with. Short yardage situation, both offensively and defensively. That's usually what they struggle with when they're playing the Eagles. But not the case last night. The Giants found a way to really persevere, keep drives going, score 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives. Jaxson Dart looked awesome. Jaxson Dart looked absolutely great last night. And I'm not going to completely say right now that Jaxson Dart and Cam Skattebo saved the franchise because it's only been 3 games, right? They're 2-1 in their 3 games that they've played together. And Dart has looked really good for the most part, and same thing with Cam Skattebo. But at the same time, there were mistakes last week. Jaxson Dart had 2 interceptions and a fumble against New Orleans. Cam Skattebo had a fumble in that game. They made up 4 of the Giants' 5 turnovers in that game last week in that loss down in Louisiana. But you look where the Giants are right now, and there's not only an identity on the offensive side of the ball, but it's the same on the defensive side of the ball. Hard-nosed football, blue-collar football. And that's starting with Cam Skattebo, who looks for contact every single time he is out there and he gets the ball in his hands. He's looking to make contact with somebody, try to run through someone. So you're getting a chip on his shoulder every single time he touches the ball. And then you look at the Giants' defensive line in that pass rush, and those guys are hungry. They're trying to get sacks each and every play. You look at Kayvon Thibodeau, all the progress he's made this season. He's looked excellent and was definitely worth the 5th overall pick the way he's been playing right now. He looks completely polished, locked in great shape, and just ready to go every single snap. And then you look at other guys. Abdul Carter, a top draft pick to the Giants this offseason. He's looked awesome. And it's not even just him. You look at another guy, Brian Burns, who had 2 sacks last night and is tied for the NFL league lead in sacks right now at 7. The Giants have just really come together, and they're playing a blue chip, blue collar type of football. Take Jaxson Dart, for example. Last night had a rough hit where he potentially could have been done for the game. They did test him for a concussion, which in that moment he goes into the blue tent. Not only did Brian Daboll go over at one point, and Daboll said afterwards he was arguing, team doctors just a little bit just because he wanted to see if Dart could go out there, because if Dart could go out and potentially play for that 3rd down snap, he would have wasted a timeout, and rather than have Russell Wilson throw an incomplete pass intended for Jalen Hyde in that situation, he would have had Jaxson Dart in that game for that moment. But obviously the protocol took longer than Daboll hoped for, which at the end of the day, he respects what the doctors were doing. And he said, they obviously had to do their due diligence, but he wanted to know if Dart could go back in the game, he would have wasted timeout. But at the end of the day, he didn't know in that moment. So Wilson went out there and played that 3rd down snap, which the Giants ended up punting on that drive. But if you look at that, right after Daboll goes over, Cam Skattebo goes over. And he even gets thrown out by a couple trainers and team doctors out of the blue tent. But Skattebo was going over there to check on his brother. And it seems like Dart and Skattebo have a great relationship. And like I said, it's tough to completely give the keys to the franchise right now and say Dart and Skattebo are the exact future of this team. And I would love to say that because I'm a big fan of Jaxson Dart. I thought he was a great draft pick for the Giants. I said last year during the college football season that Dart was the quarterback I wanted the Giants to go out and get, especially if we could get him late in the 1st round and trade back into the 1st round. And that ended up being the case. Everything that I imagined would happen, that if the Giants had the opportunity to get him, they would go and do it. Everything that I imagined ended up happening. So I got my way. The Giants got Jaxson Dart. And there's going to be growing pains at rookies. And that's why I'm not going to necessarily say right now at 2-4, the Giants are going to completely turn the season around and be a playoff team. Because you never know. At the end of the day, yes, there is potential they could turn things around and be a playoff team. You never know. No one ever knows how the season's going to play out. Look at this past weekend, for example. The Buffalo Bills lost to the New England Patriots on Sunday Night Football. Not many people probably gave the Patriots a chance in that game. You look at the Giants last night, Thursday Night Football. Not many people thought the Giants would be in that game with Philadelphia, the reigning Super Bowl champions, who seem to always beat up on the Giants, especially over the last decade. And especially in a primetime game, the Giants have really struggled in primetime football over the last 10 years. They have struggled in primetime football year in and year out. So not many people gave them a chance last night. But what happened? The Giants found a way to beat the Eagles. So you never know how the NFL is going to play out. It's a real week-by-week league. Some teams are going to be good one week, and the next week they won't show up, and vice versa. You never know how things are going to play out. So the Giants do have a potential chance to make the playoffs at 2-4. With that being said, how great are the chances? Who knows? It's a real week-by-week league. You really got to chip away and win one game at a time. That's how things go. But the way Dart and Skattebo have carried themselves over the past 3 weeks, while Dart has been the starter, the Giants just have a lot more of a confidence and aura to themselves. It seems like they're playing with a lot more upbeat of a mojo, in that the team chemistry and the team morale is up. And I think it starts with the energy that those two guys bring. Skattebo and Dart bring so much energy to this locker room, and you can see that. It's evident. Look at the post-game interview, which was an absolute legendary interview after the game. Skattebo sat down with Jaxson Dart to talk to the Amazon Prime panel after the game. And you not only saw Jaxson Dart hyping up Cam Skattebo and trying to fire him up, but you also saw him firing up the rest of the analysts there. Somehow, some way, he found a way to get Ryan Fitzpatrick to rip off his shirt with Cam Skattebo, which created a legendary moment where Skattebo is yelling, Fitzmagic's yelling, the crowd's yelling, Skattebo, Skattebo. You have Jaxson Dart yelling it. It was just a legendary moment, and you could just tell the team morale's up. Still 11 games to go in the season. The Giants are 2-4, and like I said, it's a week-by-week league, so we'll see what happens. With that being said, Dart and Skattebo are going to have growing pains. There's going to be some tough fumbles. There's going to be plays where Dart should maybe just hold on to the ball and take a sack rather than trying to throw into coverage just to do it. When you have a rookie quarterback and a rookie running back, mistakes are going to happen, so I just want those two guys to still play loose and relaxed. Because last week, obviously, that loss against New Orleans, they completely shook off, and they were ready for Thursday Night Football, and they were a big-time reason the Giants won that game. Skattebo was awesome. 19 carries and 98 yards and 3 touchdowns. He actually became the second Giants rookie running back in franchise history to have 3 rushing touchdowns in a single game, joining Charlie Evans, who had 3 touchdowns versus San Diego in 1971, and that's a stat courtesy of Art Stapleton on Twitter. You also add in the fact that Skattebo had 110 total yards on 21 touches, and then you look across, right, at Jaxson Dart, he had 253 total yards, adding in 2 total touchdowns, and was 17 of 25 passing. And the Giants' offense had 0 turnovers, which is probably the most important statistic because that's really what hurt them in that game against New Orleans, were turnovers. Turnovers were a big reason the Giants lost that game, but last night they took care of the ball and obviously took advantage when they had the opportunity, just like that interception Cor'Dale Flott had. The Giants took advantage and made Philly pay. And that's something Philly would always do to the Giants. The Giants would turn the ball over and Philly would make the Giants pay. That's always how it's been in years past. And the Giants have struggled in the division. This is the Giants' first divisional win in 9 games. They were 0-8 in their last 8 NFC East games heading into last night. So an improbable win for the New York Giants. Andrew Thomas has been awesome heading into last night. And this was a stat before last night's game, so it's probably even better now. But heading into last night, in the 3 games he played this season, 86 pass blocking snaps, 0 pressures allowed. So having Andrew Thomas back has been huge for this offense. And then you also add in Dart's playing more confidently. And I just think once Russell Wilson lost his job as a starting quarterback and Dart stepped in, the team just started playing with more energy. And the team morale just seemed to be up. And you could see that Skattebo and Dart bring a lot of energy and life to that locker room. And that's what this team needed. When you're 1-4, you need guys that are trying to pick everybody up and keep the team morale up, because at the end of the day, 1-4 isn't necessarily the end of the season. You still have some time to figure things out and get back on track. With that being said, obviously when you're 1-4, it's not easy to get back on track. It all starts with 1 game at a time, and that's just how football is. It's a long season. You can turn things around, but when you're 1-4, it's a really tough hole to get out of. But it's good to see those 2 guys keeping the team morale up. And it's great to see Jaxson Dart, as a rookie quarterback, have the impact on the rest of his teammates that he's had so far. Jaxson Dart gets hurt, and everybody right away, including the fan base and all of his teammates, Brian Daboll included, are either running over if they can to check on him in the medical tent, which that's what Brian Daboll did and Skattebo did. And then you have everybody in the fan base taking a gasp. And when he went down to the field, you had the whole team all concerned. And I know that happens a lot of time when teammates get hurt. Players, that are their teammates are going to react and obviously wish them the best. But when Dart got hurt last night, you're going to see the team rallied around him. And the second he gets back in the game, on that next drive, the team's locked in again, ready to go. So credit to Jaxson Dart and Skattebo. Like I said, there's going to be growing pains. Just because of the great game they had last night doesn't mean they're now going to go on a run and the Giants are going to win the next 11 games. You never know what's going to happen, right? Anything's possible. But the reality is these guys are going to make mistakes. And I just hope that with how much positivity that's around them right now, I hope people just stay relaxed and, allow them to keep playing freely. Because if you let them play freely, you could see some beauty like we saw last night where the Giants beat the Philadelphia Eagles. But then when you let them play freely, you might also see some tough games and tough plays like we saw against the Saints last week. That's just a reality. But I'm really optimistic with Jaxson Dart and Skattebo. Like I said, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic because I don't want to give too many expectations around them right now, especially as rookies. But the way Dart's played in the first 3 games, he's just very composed. Going through his progressions very, very well. Throwing some real great passes last night, even ones that were incompletions. He had some beautiful throws. One of them being to Jalen Hyatt in the left corner of the end zone, where Hyatt was getting grabbed in the end zone, ended up being called a pass interference call, and that ended up leading the Giants to get the ball to the 1-yard line, and Skattebo getting, I believe at the time, it was his 3rd touchdown. But that was a great pass by Dart, and it was almost caught by Hyatt. Hyatt tried to get his hands around the defensive back to try to make the play, but ends up being a penalty, and the Giants get the ball at the 1. But that was a great throw on target, and it gave Hyatt a chance to make a play. And Hyatt got some opportunities last night with the Giants receivers being hurt and being banged up heading into last night. He got some opportunities, and he took advantage of that, had a couple catches last night. Theo Johnson had a great play last night to give the Giants a first down to keep a drive going. Dart made a great play on that one. I think it was like a 15-yard catch where Theo Johnson got the first down and more, got a couple yards after the catch, and it was a great play where Dart went through his progressions and found the open receiver. And this was a play in the third quarter with 3 minutes to go just about. The Giants are facing 3rd and 8. And Dart went through each of his progressions, found Theo Johnson cutting over the middle open with some room, and perfectly placed the ball, getting it around the defensive player so that it wouldn't get intercepted or batted into the air, and put it where only Theo Johnson could catch it. And that was a big-time pass. And that showed that Jaxson Dart has matured. And it's only been 3 games, so there's going to be growing pains, like I've already noted now many of times. You just got to be lenient with these rookie quarterbacks and let them play freely and play comfortably. But it showed that Jaxson Dart is learning in this offense. He's knowing where guys are going to be open. He's knowing when to check the ball down to his running back. He's knowing when to throw the ball away. One thing is he does run a lot and he takes a lot of hits. That's something I think he's still learning, is to slide more and take less hits. But at the same time, he's a gamer. He wants to get the first down, just like Skattebo. They're always looking for contact to try to get the first down. But at the same time, you don't want to see these guys get hurt. The way Skattebo plays, every single time he's running with the ball, it looks like he's going to get hurt because he's always putting his head down, putting his shoulder down. And that's something you worry about as a Giants fan. You don't want to see him get hurt. You don't want to see Jaxson Dart get hurt because they do run a lot and they just play fearlessly sometimes. You want to see those two guys stay healthy, though, to try to keep this momentum going. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. But right now, the Giants' mojo is back. And we're only 2-4, right? Like, we still have a long road ahead. We're 2-1 in our last 3 games, though, with Jaxson Dart making 3 starts. That is a good start to his career. And if you look at the Giants' defense last night, they held Saquon Barkley to just 58 yards on the ground, which the Eagles were down for a lot of this game, so they were going to be passing the ball more than usual, which Hurts had 283 passing yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And he also added in 13 rushing yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. One thing that the broadcast pointed out last night multiple times was that when the Philadelphia Eagles do the tush push, a lot of the time those guards are moving early and they could be potentially false starts. And I know the naked eye isn't going to pick that up because it really is just a 1/10 of a second, a 100th of a second early. And that's not going to pick up. The naked eye is not going to pick that up unless you go, to an overhead shot over the field. You have a camera that's over the field where you can kind of see who's starting early and who's not. Unless you do that, the referees on the sideline is probably not going to pick that up because once the ball snapped, it's really just a mess in there and everything just kind of blends together. So no one's going to really pick up the fact that those guards are starting early on some of those tush pushes. But the broadcast did pick that up last night. I didn't really notice it as much in the past, which I know people have mentioned it, but I haven't seen it as much until last night when they really went slow-mo, and on 2 different tush pushes inside the red zone for the Eagles, you could see the guards starting early. And obviously Brian Daboll is upset about it, but the naked eye isn't going to pick up those false starts because of how quick everything happens. It really is a 1/10 of a second early maybe, and you don't even see it. You don't even see it because the ball is getting snapped as the guy's kind of leaning forward. But he's already leaning forward before that ball is snapped and before the center's hand is already starting to move. But at the end of the day, can't complain. The Giants found a way to win, and that's most important. Last night, A.J. Brown had 6 catches for 80 yards, and he was upset with the Eagles the last 2 or 3 weeks. He's kind of been upset all season with some of the targets he's gotten, and I know Devontae Smith's been upset. He had 4 catches for 49 yards last night, and he actually almost had a wide-open touchdown last night. The Giants were fortunate that Hurts and him couldn't connect on that play. But the Eagles receivers have been upset, and I think it's because Jalen Hurts in this offense, it's a run-first offense. And they won the Super Bowl last year, so I'm not going to, really say too much about them and say that their offense isn't great because they have a lot of talent and they show that they can win. They won the Super Bowl last year, so I really cannot, criticize them too much. But it's a run-heavy offense, and it's a run-first offense. And Jalen Hurts, I just don't have as much confidence in throwing the ball. If you really take away that run game and he's forced to throw, that puts him in a tough situation. And I know they've been up a lot of the time over the last year and change. They've been up in a lot of games where they didn't really have to throw the ball. When they're up, they just really run the ball a lot. And as I said, they were a run-heavy offense. So Hurts was never really looking for Brown and Smith in some certain situations when they're up 30 points. They're just trying to run the clock out. But this season, they've been down in some games, and now they're 4-2, so they still have a good record. But they were down in some of those games where they had chances to throw the ball. And Hurts was not able to connect with Brown and Smith as much as he's had. And you could see this frustration. I wouldn't be surprised if A.J. Brown requests a trade at some point. Truly, just you could see he's visibly upset, not getting the ball. And I know Smith has shown some frustration as well, not getting the ball. And I get that as a receiver. It's important. You want to see, obviously, a team win the game. But at the same time, these guys want to get the ball. They're all hungry. They all, do their work during the week, watch film, run routes hard. They're all trying to, make plays out there and try to help their team win. And you can see A.J. Brown has not been happy with the way things have been going. So I would not be surprised if he requests a trade at some point. We'll see, though. It's just really speculation. Who knows, what's actually going on behind the scenes. The Giants did get lucky, though, last night to some degree. Jalen Carter being out did help the Giants. He's been a guy that's hurt them in the past. And Skattebo probably wouldn't have ran as much and had as much success if Jalen Carter was playing. Then you also add in Quinyon Mitchell got hurt, which helped the Giants as well, considering he's a great cornerback, and he's a guy I really liked in the draft out of Toledo. I wanted the Giants to draft him. They obviously ended up not drafting him. He fell to the Eagles and ended up being a great draft pick for them. And they also had Cooper DeJean get hurt at one point. He was banged up, but he kind of played through it. So the Giants were a little bit fortunate, seeing that the Eagles didn't have, their entire team full strength. But at the same time, that can't discredit that win. This is an Eagles team that has beat the Giants, it seems like, time in and time out. This is the Giants' first win against the Eagles since 2023, and the Giants' first divisional win in the last 9 games. They were 0-8 heading into last night in their last 8 NFC East games. Found a way to win last night. Now they're 1-8 in their last 9. And primetime TV has not been nice to the Giants in the past, especially against the Eagles. The Giants lost 11 straight primetime games against the Eagles heading into last night. 11 straight primetime games against the Eagles they lost heading into last night. And in the Jaxson Dart era, they're 1-0 in primetime football. Heading into last night, the Giants were 3-23 in primetime games since 2018. 3 wins and 23 losses in primetime football since 2018, which is abysmal. But no matter what, the Giants found a way to win last night. Things are at least looking somewhat up for the Giants, 2-4, but there's some momentum, 2-1 in the Jaxson Dart era. We'll see what the future holds. I'm sure there's more that I wish I mentioned in this episode, but it was just supposed to be a quick recap. And this was all based on the top of the head. Didn't really get to do too much research and didn't really get to watch too much of the film after the game last night. I did miss a good amount of the first quarter, so there's definitely more that I have to see from that. But this was just a recap because I wanted to at least capture some of the beauty from last night's win and also recognize Skattebo and Dart for bringing this team morale up. And at the same time, the fan morale as well. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.